The Charlotte Hornets actually won a series against a team. They win the Battle of the Pig Trophy against the Atlanta Hawks. Miles Bridges makes a winning play. Brandon Miller may have had the dunk of the year. We'll get right to it all today on Locked On Hornets.
You are Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free and available anywhere you get your pods, and that includes YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. There's Doug Branson. You can find him on his Substack, everyhornetsboxscore.com, and I'm Walker Mail. You can listen to me on WFNZ every weekday from 12 to 3 p.m. 115, 114. The Hornets are victorious. They get to the 20th victory of the season, which I appreciate, by the way. I didn't want to be in the teens. I wanted to make sure we could just secure somehow that 20th win. I know the Tankanistas. We want to make sure that we have the best odds for that first overall pick. But this is a draft where everybody's saying, of course, the weakest draft in the world is when the Hornets are going to get the first overall pick. Who cares? Give me the 20 wins. Give me the Pig Trophy. Give me this specific win against Atlanta, who they've low-key owned the last couple of years, which is a beautiful thing. Miles Bridges, huge layup and transition. On that transition play, he puts it up, and I think there's like 6 seconds left. Hawks not able to score afterwards. Big-time victory for the Hornets. If you want to finish strong, you had the dud against Dallas, but at least you had a nice weekend against Orlando and OKC. Dud against Dallas. Then you have the win against the Hawks. Maybe we can finish strong at the end of the season, Doug. Who knows?
Well, maybe. But look, yes, I agree with you that there is some weird thing about 20 wins, that it's not the teens, because really what they're fighting against at this point is infamy. Like, this season will, no matter if they win out the next two road games, like, this season will be grouped into those infamous two Bobcat seasons, the 7-59 season, and then they draft MKG. The follow-up season was also one of the worst seasons in franchise history, or at least and certainly in modern franchise history. Before, you could probably look back at those first couple of seasons, back in the late 80s, 90s when they were, franchise drafting, but. Yeah, so it's always going to be grouped with that, but getting to 20 wins is important, I think. And so, strangely important. I don't know why it's important, but it's important. But
it is, though. But just trust us. It is.
Just trust us. We needed it. I didn't want to see 19. I wanted to see 20. But we have to lay in the context of this win. And the context of this win is that the Hawks were up 15 points after three quarters, and they were playing most of their starters who weren't injured. They get Trae Young back. And then in the fourth quarter, up 15, Quinn Snyder decided, all right, I'm going to rest all of those starters, and we're going to go deep reserves the rest of the way, because the Hawks were on the second night of a back-to-back in which they lost in double overtime to the Miami Heat, and some of those other starters had played huge minutes, and they're about to go to the play. They're locked into the play-in. Now, I know this isn't Locked On Hawks, but they could have improved. I think they still have the ability to improve their play-in spot. And avoid the Philadelphia 76ers, but that's for Brad Rowland and the Hawks to talk about. But they decided.
Well, Steve Clifford talked about it. Like, Steve Clifford, after that game against Dallas, he said, okay, we're going to have these next few games, and Boston. He called the Boston game meaningless, that they're not going to care what happens. But against Atlanta, that's a big game for him, and I guess against Cleveland at the end of the season, with them reeling right now. That's going to be a big one, too. But Clifford took note of that, just like you did.
It was fan appreciation night in Atlanta, too, and I guess they didn't appreciate fans enough to actually try and win the game. But you have to credit the Hornets, too, because down 15, and I think you have to credit two guys in particular, or three guys. I'm going to point out three guys in particular that I think you have to credit. First, Brandon Miller. And not just that sick dunk that he laid down, but also the fact that his three-point shooting and scoring in general kept the Hornets from being down 20 points going into the fourth quarter, or more than 20 points, because they could have easily been down that many because of how well Atlanta was shooting on the other end and how poorly the Hornets were defending. But his shooting kept them within striking distance and allowed them to come back in that fourth quarter. Grant Williams, his scoring inside, he had 11 points in the fourth quarter, tough buckets, and he went straight up and had the great defensive play that led to the Miles Bridges transition bucket that you mentioned. And then the final guy is Trey Mann, who finished this game with 7 steals, and 3 of those were in the fourth quarter. That included, I guess, I thought it was a block that he had to seal the game. Final possession, 3 seconds left for Atlanta. They had a good half-court opportunity, inbounds opportunity, and Trey Mann just took it away. And they credited that as a steal. I thought it was a block, but he finishes with 7 steals, a pretty high number there.
Yeah, it is. No, and he's so good at that. Like Trey Mann, it's one thing to put your hand in a passing lane and then deflect the basketball and then it dribble and somebody else pick it up, which is a great defensive play. Hell yeah, you'll take that every single time. Trey Mann is so good at anticipating passing lanes sometimes where he'll just outright jump in front of the pass and catch it and then start the fast break. And this is something we can go back to just the last few games that I saw. I think I keep referencing these games just because they're the ones that stand out. I remember it was either Orlando or, it was one of those 2 games, Milwaukee, earlier this year, where he did the same thing. And he catches it. It's an easy catch on a pass because he anticipates it so well. And here he is again with 7 steals. It was cool. Like that's a fun game for Trey Mann, who isn't great shooting from distance, but got to the line 6 times, hit 5 of his free throws, 7 assists, 7 steals. Like that's a fun stat line for Trey.
Well, and that's the stat line that I feel like Trey Mann is building his career on right now. Is like he's a guy that can give you double-digit rebounds sometimes. He's a guy that can give you double-digit assists sometimes, and he almost gave you double-digit steals here. He does a little bit of everything. I just think that like with Trey Mann, his moves are so good that I just wish he was a better finisher. I wish he was a better scorer. And maybe he only needs to be slightly a better scorer because he is capable of putting up big numbers scoring, but we just haven't seen it very consistently. And I think that's what Clifford has talked about with him is just consistency is going to be big for him. Can he avoid those nights where it's just a complete disaster? A lot like Vasa Micic had in this game. Talk about a complete disaster. One thing on the steals, so I looked this up, Walker. There's only one Hornet that has gotten close to double-digit steals. Would you like to guess at which Hornets player got close?
Just of all time, I'm guessing, is what you're saying. Well,
yes.
I know Kendall Gill has the record for steals in a game, even if it wasn't set with the Hornets.
It was 7. You're right. It was 11. It's tied for the most. I was going to mention that too. That was with the New Jersey Nets.
Yeah. So Kendall Gill, at least we got some kind of Hornets history there, even if it wasn't with the Hornets. I don't know who it is. Is it? It
was another shooting guard, one of the best shooting guards in Hornets history. We haven't had a lot of them, but there was one in particular that was pretty good.
Not Glenn Rice.
Eddie Jones. Eddie Jones had 9 steals in a game.
That makes sense. Total sense. Makes total sense. Yeah.
I think he probably led the league in steal. I'm not sure about that, but I think he led
did
the league
at least
steals.
once or twice during his time in the NBA. So that makes total sense. Yeah, awesome to see from Trey Mann. Other trend I wanted to mention before we move on. So Brandon Miller deserves a lot of praise for what he did. If we haven't gone through his stat line, 27 points, 5 of 11 from 3, 9 of 17 from the field. He also went 4 of 4 from the free throw line, Doug. A little bit of a trend developing there. That's 4 straight games where he's attempted at least 4 free throw attempts, and that is by far the longest stretch. It's funny to say by far because you can't even get by far when you only have 4 of those. But I looked through his game log to the best of just a first glance. There was back-to-back 4 attempt games, but never 4 games in a row of at least 4 free throw attempts. So he's starting to get to the line more, and that's used against him. We might get to that a little bit later, but the lack of free throw attempts for Brandon this year at that size, it's a justified criticism. We have too much criticism for those types of tall guards not getting to the foul line, right? We did this with LaMelo. We're doing it with Brandon now. It's legit. We did it with Miles Bridges, by the way, when he was drafted. He got better at that as his career went on. But it's good to see. I also wonder if it's a goal, like a strict get to the line 4 times these last X amount of games because it's happening. I'm not saying that's what Steve Clifford is saying to Brandon, but at least he's playing like it. And there is some more aggression that's leading to some of this stuff. So it's nice to see before the season ends.
I think you're just going to naturally see it rise as he gets bigger. As he continues to hit the weight room, and gain some more confidence. I think and as his three-point shooting continues to improve, and as, defenses respond to that, he's going to have more opportunities, more driving lanes, for him. What I liked about this game, and I'll go back to the OKC game as well, is that Brandon got opportunities to hit big shots in clutch moments, like final 3 minutes of the game, and he missed those opportunities. And then he followed it up in this game and in OKC by putting his head down, driving and getting fouled and knocking down shots at the free throw line. So to me, that's like mature player, that's veteran savvy. That's like, all right, I missed the shot. It's not going to kill my confidence. Next time, I'm just going to put my head down, get to the rack, and get fouled. And he did it. And so, impressive play from Brandon all around. And look, I've said this a couple times. If he's not scoring, it's difficult for him right now to make a big impact on the game. And so here you have 27 points, you have 3 rebounds, you have 2 assists. Obviously, looking into year 2, I want to see that balance out a little bit, but you have to give it up to Brandon, who said, I'm going to take over. Like, he was aggressive. Like, when he got the ball and he had a sliver of room from beyond the arc, the guy was putting it up, and love to see it.
Yeah, we do. Let's move on. I want to talk more about those clutch moments coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Don't go to sleep on the
Let's
Hornets
get to some of the other moments that we've had. The moment that we got from Miles Bridges last night, and also Brandon Miller's dunk, it made me realize, you know what? We haven't had a lot of those this year. So let's reflect on some of the moments we actually did have this season. That's still to come here on Locked On Hornets. This episode is brought to you by Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level. The 2024 Nissan Rogue is perfect for city drives and great escapes. Classic, exclusive Google built-in is your always updating assistant to call on for almost anything. Gone are the days of connecting your phone. Google Assistant, Google Maps, and Google Play Store are built right into the 12.3-inch high-definition touchscreen and Foreman system. The 2024 Rogue is the perfect midsize crossover for your next adventure. You also have the 2024 Nissan Pathfinder. It has room for up to 8 people, an expansive cargo capacity, and advanced available 4x4 capability with 284 horsepower and up to 6,000 pounds towing. When adventure calls, the Pathfinder is there to answer. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop nissanusa.com. More to come. Locked On Hornets. Doug, I was trying to think of moments that were like last night where it came down to the wire. The Hornets delivered. They won. Don't have many of those wins. We got to 20, which we established. It is important. You just have to trust us on this. It is important. But at least we got one victory. So I was looking at some other ones here. The ones that I could think of throughout the season. Miles had another one against Boston in that overtime win where he was able to hit a go-ahead 3 that put him up 3 in overtime. And then eventually that would be a huge win at the beginning of the season. Melo had the first one, I think, when he had the defensive swipe against Tyrese Halliburton.
Sure.
I think that was one of the more exciting
What are you
ones.
talking about? That was 5 years ago.
I know, exactly. It was. That was 2017. No, not, my friend. It was actually in 2023. It was, I seen it. I promise. I looked it up. So we had the Tyrese Halliburton swipe. The other wins that they've had, some of them came down to the wire, but it really wasn't like a standout play, right? Like and even the Boston one, when Miles hits that 3, that was at the very end. And so that was big. But with Minnesota, crazy win, right? The craziest one of the season, maybe even more so against Boston because Nick Smith Jr. was playing. Leaky Black hit free throws at the end of that game to secure it against Minnesota. Cat had the 60-point performance as well. But it was one of those things where they kept scoring to keep Minnesota just at a little bit of distance. There wasn't this one play that you take away from that game. We have the dunk from Brandon, which maybe we can get to more, but the bucket for Miles to put them up We haven't had many of those. And so that's why it's cool to give us at least one more before the season ends.
I cannot confirm this fact. So, me and facts have had a tough relationship this season, but I can't confirm this. But I'm pretty sure that I heard Dominique Wilkins on the Hawks broadcast. Because of blackout restrictions, I'm forced to watch the Hawks broadcast here in Nashville. I'm pretty sure I heard Neek say that the Hornets are 6-3 in games decided by 3 points or less. And so I guess this would be 7-3 now. So, and I think that strangely tracks, because this team has really executed much better than they have in years past, just in terms of like sidelines out of bounds plays, baseline out of bounds plays, late game execution. They've generally been pretty good at that, and a lot of that lays at the feet of Brandon Miller and Miles Bridges. Particularly Miles Bridges does a lot of wonky shot selection in the middle of games, but when things get tight, he's made generally good decisions. And so that tracks. It's either been like win the close game or lose by 25. That really has been the season, and unfortunately it's been more the latter than the former.
Well, I'm counting. I don't know how many. You said 3 losses with 7 points or less?
No, 3 points or less. Decided by 3 points or less.
Okay, yeah, because I'm looking at some. Yeah, I mean, just, again, a first glance at the schedule, looking at some of the results, it does look like it tracks. And even beforehand, I remember at the beginning of the season, probably like the first 20 games or so, I said kind of flippantly just, the Hornets finally win a close game. And, people checked me, not a great relationship with facts that day, because it's like, well, actually, when it's close, the Hornets are winning some of these. It's just when they lose, they get blown out. That had been the case. And here the Hornets are winning again at the very end. The Brandon Miller dunk, speaking of moments, Brandon Miller, he probably gave us the 2 best dunks of the season, because he'll catch a body. Had it against the Hawks here.
Utah, he got Kessler for 1.
Walker, Kessler, those are the 2 that I think I go to for him. But it also reminds me, like when Miles Bridges was dunking, which his athleticism did not show up very much at all this year. Something maybe we can talk about later. But, Brandon Miller and Miles, it feels like they had among their career dunks against Atlanta when Miles had his against Clint Capella, and we all went crazy. Brandon has his now against Atlanta. He also has the one against Utah. That was sensational. Like, that's a fun one, driving and then going to your left and the launching pad, the point of his launch. That was fun.
This one was better than I think the Kessler one, because the Kessler one, well, it just all depends on, I guess, what your personal preference is, because the Kessler one was him getting a launch pad and just getting over top of Kessler and catching him a little off guard. This one,
the hang was sweet with Kessler. Like, if you like a hang at the end, the Utah one's probably for you.
Well, it's strength versus finesse and skill, or strength versus skill, right? Because that one was strength. Now, this one was skill, because before he yammed it home, he broke Garrison Matthews' ankles. I mean, he put that guy on the floor. That was like, it had a little Kemba Walker in it in the first half, and then in the second half, it had some Miles Bridges, it had some Larry Johnson, like it had some of that. So I think that's honestly, that dunk was better than the Kessler one.
We got a couple moments, Doug, right? Like, at least at the very end, and we got the good win against Orlando. We almost had one against Oklahoma City. OKC is just too good, and Isaiah Joe hit a couple threes to keep us at arm's length. But we got a couple moments, and I'll take that before we go to the last couple of games of the season. Let's move on. We have one more segment to go coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets.
We have rookie rankings. Brandon Miller, of course, not as high as you would like him to be because of stupid reasons. We'll get to it in just a moment here on Locked On Hornets. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. It's playoff time in the NBA and the NHL. It's getting close, at least, and baseball's in full swing. FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. More Locked On Hornets ahead. All right, Doug, let's do the power ranking thing. We haven't really kept track all that much of the NBA.com rookie ladder and all that this year. It feels like for us, we pretty much know where Brandon Miller ranks amongst the rookies, and I guess it's a little different with Chet Holmgren in this past draft class. If you're going by rookies with Chet Holmgren, Brandon's third. That's just how it is. And if you're doing just the draft class, Brandon is second. The Hornets got the second best player in this draft class, at least as what we saw this past season, with Wemby being number one. And we just kind of felt like it was so obvious and so easy. We haven't spent a whole lot of time debating that. We have some power rankings from ESPN that differs from us just a little bit. And it's not even really power rankings, you're saying, Doug?
Yeah, this was. So the NBA rookie ladder is pretty clear, and it's been clear since Brandon Miller started racking up Eastern Conference Rookie of the Month. He's been third to Wemby and Chet, and that's been solid. They just did their final one, and they actually listed this thing from ESPN. It's titled NBA Rookie Power Rankings. What does the future hold for Victor Wembanyama? And it's just a discussion. It's a back and forth between our baby boy Bobby Marks. Kevin Pelton is involved in this. It might just be these two guys going back and forth. Yeah, it's just a discussion. There's no power ranking. I was told there would be a power ranking, and I see no list. I just see a lot of words.
I don't get it. Well, this is what ESPN does. Like, they'll do this for NFL offseason stuff. They'll have a couple writers just, put their opinion back and forth, and they'll talk and go with one another. But
we don't want that. We don't want that, ESPN. We want a number and a name, and then another number and another name, so on, so forth.
Give me the list. If you want to give me a conversation, that's fine, but just give me the list. And so it looks like they debate on, are we past the point, at least, of debating whether Wemby or Chet should win Rookie of the Year? Like, that's a totally fair question. And then what happens when they start getting to Brandon Miller here, Doug?
Well, he is really an afterthought for both Pelton and Marks, who start talking about how they're going to fill out their all-rookie first team. And both Pelton and Marks are pretty clear that their next two selections are Jaime Jaquez and Brandon Pajemski. And then there's some Derek Lively discussion. But Brandon Miller is sort of an afterthought. Kevin Pelton said, the trickier case is number 2 pick Brandon Miller, who has been asked to play a much larger role on a Charlotte Hornets team that played without LaMelo Ball. Miller has averaged 17.3 points per game, second among rookies behind Wembanyama, but his advanced numbers were poor because of limited free throw attempts, 2.5 per 36 minutes, and how bad the Hornets were defensively with him on the court. And he does, in parentheses, this is important, he says they weren't much better with him on the bench. Right?
Yeah. Well, then why are we – okay. Then why are we mentioning it? Like, look, Brandon hasn't been amazing defensively. He's had some fun blocks. He has some help side stuff. I think he gets taken to the basket very easily. I don't think there's a lot of resistance there. I'm hoping that comes with strength and just foundation, where to be, how to beat your guy to the spot, all that stuff. Doug, if we really are flirting, and if you have him 5th, then like
I think they have him. They had him 6th in the previous ranking, and the discussion really. I know you're disgusted. You can't work for ESPN.com. And I love Bobby Marks. Kevin Pelton is amazing. Boy. Why? Like, you can't have Brandon Miller potentially on a second team all rookie squad. That can't happen. There's nobody that watches and thinks, yeah, probably 6th. They should. You know what they should do? They should apologize. I don't know why people are screaming at me in my mentions, asking me to apologize. These people are the problem, because I have watched Brandon Miller grow this season, and I have praised him, and I have said, look, the future, you get your licks in on Brandon Miller now, because he is going to be a problem sooner rather than later. And you got these folks talking about Brandon Pajemski and Jaime Jaquez. This is all obsession with wins, right? But if you took Brandon Miller and put him on the Warriors, or you took Brandon Miller and you put him on the Heat, guess what he would do? He would do the exact same things he's been doing for Charlotte, and they would be praising him. Guess what happens if you would have taken Brandon Pajemski and Jaime Jaquez and put them on the Charlotte Hornets this season? They would have done the exact same thing that Brandon Miller is doing, and they would have him. They would be devaluing them. That's all this is about.
This doesn't make any sense to me. because Bobby Marks is talking about who his solid top four is. Like, it's not even it's a no-brainer. Here we were saying it's a no-brainer that Brandon Miller is the third best rookie this year. And then it's Bobby Marks discussing how it's a no-brainer that Brandon Miller is not in the top four and that Pajemski and Jaquez are in his top four. And then he said the quagmire. This is not quagmire, okay? Brandon Miller can be found nowhere on Family Guy. The quagmire comes with the last spot. No, it doesn't. He said there's a case to be made for Miller. It's like, oh, okay, thank you for considering him. There's a case to be made for Miller, who averaged 19.3 points and shot close to 37% from three since the start of March. But he says this, however, since the start of March, the Hornets are 4-15, and 12 of those 15 losses were by double digits. This is hurting Brandon because the team is terrible, because the team got worse at the trade deadline. They got better with depth, at least at the time, but they traded Terry Rozier with no inclination that they would be better, okay? They traded P.J. Washington for a first-round pick for depth. They traded Gordon Hayward for depth. LaMelo's hurt. Mark is hurt. So now you're discussing all of these moving parts with all of these players that were foundation pieces coming into the season that are no longer on the roster. And Brandon, all he does is play over 70 games and have to shoulder the load offensively for this team. And because the Hornet, this is the best case they're giving us, Doug. This is what their case is that they're worse with him on the floor defensively, parentheses, they still suck with him on the bench, by the way. Okay, so they just suck. That's what happens. They just suck. And also they're losing a lot of games. That can't be the reason as to why Brandon isn't third, let alone if second team all rookie would be absolutely crazy.
Yeah. Well, what's hurting Brandon Miller is exactly what we thought would hurt him pre-draft, which is that his body is not NBA ready. He came in like a lot of guys do. This is not, unusual these days. Guys come in early and their body isn't ready. They're not coming out as juniors or seniors anymore. And so we're not going to see the full realization of what Brandon Miller is until year 2, year 3, year 4. And so that's hurting him. But what's also hurting him, and I think Pelton does, knock on this a little bit, is that he has been asked to play a much larger role than anyone thought he was going to play. And there's a scenario here, Walker, where he was starting but getting less usage, slightly less minutes, putting up less shots, and he's scoring, instead of scoring 19, he's scoring 15 or 16, but it's on, better true shooting. Instead of being like a 40% shooter, he's like a 45% shooter. And then, these number geeks aren't as like upset about it.
I guess my next question would be, if you are Bobby Marks or Kevin Pelton, or let's say you're Pat Riley, let's say you're Sam Presti with Kason Wallace, who gets a lot of love, let's say you're any of these other guys, you want to trade? I bet you do.
That should be the question, really, when you're making your ballot. That should ultimately be the question. Are you going to trade Kason Wallace for Brandon Miller? No, absolutely not. Are you going to trade Trace Jackson Davis for Brandon Miller? No, you're absolutely not.
If you want to argue it's about what they do in their role, then fine. But Brandon Miller has his role here, and it's he's doing the best he can. All right, that'll do it for Locked On Hornets. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free and available anywhere you get your podcast, including YouTube. Subscribe and hit the notification button. Also, make sure you subscribe to Doug Branson's Substack, everyhornetsboxscore.com, and you can listen to me on WFNZ every weekday from 12 to 3 p.m. Have a great rest of your day. We'll be back with you tomorrow.